Following my son's scam that ruined my business and my standing, I wound up serving tables. One afternoon, a rich executive quipped, "Investment tips server." He had no clue about my past. I glanced at his documents. "You'll go broke in half a year." He brushed it off with a chuckle. The following morning, right at dawn, he showed up at my doorstep. "If this video has caught your eye, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your location." Allow me to rewind to the beginning of it all. A couple of years earlier, I went by Catherine Wells, top executive at Wells and Associates Financial Advisory. I occupied premium suites in the heart of Chicago, oversaw investments exceeding $50 million, and cruised in a BMW pricier than many folks' yearly earnings. My clientele ranged from innovative tech founders and property tycoons to established dynasties who relied on me for safeguarding their inherited fortunes. That's when my son Michael chose to emulate a Wall Street villain by tampering with customer accounts. The federal bust occurred on an autumn Tuesday. I was examining seasonal summaries when officers in dark blue gear burst past our elegant wooden entrances as if they held the deed, which in a sense they did after affixing confiscation orders to items ranging from my beverage cup to my credentials. Michael had been faking my authorization for 8 months, shuffling funds around like a street hustler running a shell game with individuals' nest eggs. $2.7 million vanished, taking my credibility, certification, and mental stability along with it. The sarcasm didn't escape me. I'd dedicated 3 decades to educating others on identifying monetary pitfalls, yet my own child had been flaunting them directly in my view. The press reveled in the spectacle. Advisors' offspring swindles patrons in pyramid fraud. My identity featured in each banner. Despite being the primary casualty, the legal actions followed swiftly. Private claims from patrons who'd forfeited their reserves. Legal trials that absolved me judicially but wrecked me career-wise. Even cleared of charges, no one sought guidance from the lady whose kin had plundered them outright. Come holiday season, I was 68 with just $47 in my bank and a tiny rental in an area where emergency wails formed the main soundtrack. That's the moment I spotted the employment notice at Murphy's Eatery. Murphy's Eatery hardly qualified as upscale cuisine. The brew resembled something strained through worn athletic gear. The padded seats showed more splits than a windy city pavement in winter. And the glaring bulbs cast a pallor on patrons as if they harbored rare ailments, but it offered same-day pay. No background checks needed. And the proprietor, Tommy Murphy, ignored my notoriety in the business sections for unfavorable motives. "Have you handled tables previously?" Tommy inquired in my session, which involved him eyeing me while cleaning his palms on a soiled cloth. "I've catered to folks for 3 decades, I replied. It wasn't entirely false. The position proved tougher than overseeing massive investment pools, believe it or not. At minimum, investment overseers added courtesy when acting superior. The morning patrons at Murphy's viewed servers as mobile Java machines with the regrettable trait of voicing thoughts, yet I adjusted. I had no choice. The gratuities covered my medication. The hours occupied me sufficiently to dodge reflections on my life's catastrophic collapse. And the labor felt genuine in a manner that restored my sense of purity. After 3 months, I honed what Tommy kindly termed people-handling abilities and what I labeled the knack for grinning while imagining spiking a patron's drink. That's the point when Harrison Blackwell entered my world. It was a March weekday dawn. The sort where the city wavered between cold season and bloom, opting for gloom instead. The early surge was easing as he sauntered in as though he commanded not merely the spot, but the whole district, clad in tailored attire, premium hide footwear, and a timepiece valued higher than my earnings over the prior half-year. He appeared around his 50s with ashen locks and the assured posture of someone unaccustomed to denial for any desire. He claimed seat 7, retrieved his device, and promptly launched what resembled an aggressive merger over loudspeaker, since evidently basic politeness applied to those unable to afford elite garments. "Pardon me," I stated, nearing his spot with my finest hospitality grin. "You'll have to reduce your volume or move that discussion outdoors. Fellow diners are attempting to savor their meal." Harrison Blackwell gazed upward at me as if I'd proposed he contribute an organ to a cause. His light azure gaze performed a rapid evaluation, slotting me between decor and slight nuisance. I'll take Java, dark, and anything resembling poached eggs on toast in this venue, he declared, without truly halting his device chat regarding demolishing arrivals' seasonal forecasts. I dispensed his brew, observing that his files lay strewn over the surface like he was hosting global summits. Accounting records, consolidation papers, purchase bids. My experienced vision inevitably detected known danger signals in the dispersed materials. Long-standing routines persist stubbornly. A third of an hour on, he continued conversing, now debating a Florida property transaction with sufficient loudness to rouse ghosts. The remaining diners cast annoyed glances, and Tommy shot me the resolve this or face dismissal glare from the register. "Mister," I attempted once more. "I must pause briefly," he told his caller, then regarded me with the demeanor of addressing an especially dim youngster. "Are you aware this discussion exceeds your lifelong income?" The place fell hushed. Even the brewing vessel ceased bubbling as if anticipating the response. I gazed downward at the files littering his surface. Blackwell Ventures, property purchases, innovation firm stakes, and evident amid the jumble, the sorts of borrowing trends and liquidity markers that had caused me sleepless nights upon spotting them in prior holdings. In fact, I declared, my tone projecting just far enough for the entire establishment to catch. "I realize you're on the verge of forfeiting all you believe you possess." He fluttered his lids, obviously unprepared for his server to hold views on his commercial domain. "I request clarification. Those borrowing proportions seem risky. Your liquidity setup looks shaky, and based on what's visible, you're bearing greater obligations than your holdings can sustainably bear." The quietude in the eatery was now absolute. Harrison Blackwell gaped at me as if I'd begun uttering archaic tongues. "My apologies," Harrison stated, his tone oozing superiority, "yet I don't remember soliciting investment guidance from the server." The phrase struck the room like a strike. Several diners snickered, the awkward sort that arises when authority belittles the powerless. Tommy's complexion flushed, but he stayed silent. Not for a server contesting a patron who likely expended more on midday meals than the eatery grossed weekly. I sensed the known sting of humiliation rising along my throat. The identical sensation from each broadcast query, each tribunal session, each instance when folks viewed me as a swindler rather than the target of one. But then I glanced at those files once more, at the configurations that remained truthful. Even amid widespread deceit. "You're correct," I responded, my tone firm as frost. "You didn't inquire, but if you had, I'd advise securing a thorough review of your monetary framework before time runs out. What I observe here indicates you're bound for major issues." Harrison's chuckle was piercing and joyless. "Really? And what precisely entitles you to issue such daring forecasts regarding my operations?" "Background," I replied plainly. "I've examined sufficient ledgers to identify the alerts, even from disorganized files on an eatery surface." The hue began fading from his features. "I've heard plenty," he declared, rising suddenly and collecting his materials. "I'm unsure where you believe you acquired knowledge of accounting reviews, but Catherine Wells," I murmured. He stiffened. "Wells and Associates Investment Advisory. I directed holdings for 3 decades prior to my son obliterating my firm. I've witnessed more economic calamities than you've convened executive sessions, and yours displays all the typical alerts." Harrison regarded me for an extended period, his countenance shifting through skepticism, fury, and perhaps apprehension. "Unbelievable," he whispered, but his tone wanted assurance. "I'd require your complete records to confirm," I stated, serving myself a mug of brew with fingers that no longer trembled. "But if you seek an expert view, I'll be present tomorrow." He departed without settling for his poached eggs. The subsequent dawn arrived overcast and sprinkling. Standard spring climate in the city that wavered between dismal and persistently irritating. I was unlocking Murphy's at sunrise, as usual every weekday, when I detected the rap on the transparent entrance. Harrison Blackwell lingered outside amid the downpour, appearing as if slumber had evaded him for days. His upscale outfit was creased, his typically immaculate tresses tousled, and he gripped a beige envelope to his torso like it held cosmic mysteries. I released the lock, noticing his premium hide footwear were drenched. "We don't begin service for another 60 minutes, I mentioned. "I must speak with you," he expressed, his speech. "Regarding your comments from before." I moved aside to admit him, activating the illumination and initiating the brewing device routinely. The place seemed altered at this time, more subdued, somehow more authentic, as if confidences flowed easier prior to the world's awakening. "Brew?" I questioned. He affirmed, easing into the identical seat from the day prior. His digits quivered mildly as he unsealed the envelope and arrayed documents over the surface. "I devoted the entire evening examining my ledgers," he revealed. "Instructed my bookkeeper to compile overview documents, retrieved logs spanning 2 years." I distributed his brew, observing the shadows beneath his gaze. "And you were accurate." The phrase emerged as if admitting a grave offense. "Concerning the alerts, the borrowing issues, the whole matter. My bookkeeper estimates perhaps 4 months until lenders begin closing in." I positioned myself opposite him, intrigued regardless. "In my former existence, patrons consulted me prior to nearing the brink, not following their descent. How did you detect it so rapidly?" he inquired. "My own monetary group missed what you identified in a third of an hour. Your monetary group earns to convey what pleases you," I remarked, tasting my brew. "I don't," Harrison chuckled, though without amusement. "Harsh truth from the lady I offended before an audience of unknowns. That's poetic justice. It often is." He inclined nearer, his light azure gaze fervent. "I require your assistance, Catherine. I'm uncertain of the form or expense, but I need an individual who can pierce the facade and inform me if escape from this disorder exists. I'm a server." I prompted him. "You're Catherine Wells," he countered. "And regardless of the events, you ranked among Chicago's sharpest economic thinkers before your son wrecked your enterprise." I experienced a sensation in my core, an emotion absent for 2 years. Perhaps career dignity, or merely the basic joy of acknowledgement for aspects beyond my son's offenses. "What precisely do you request?" "I'm requesting you to rescue my enterprise." "Rescue your enterprise?" I echoed, verifying my hearing. Mr. Blackwell, I deliver brew and record requests for breakfast items. I haven't engaged a monetary advisory task in 2 years, and when I did, it concluded with federal incursions and felony probes. "Because your son was a crook," Harrison stated frankly. "Not due to your inadequacy." The statement lingered between us. It marked the initial occasion in 2 years anyone drew that line without compensation for legal advocacy. "Moreover," he proceeded, "what risk do you face? You're employed at an eatery in a district where alarms sing bedtime tunes. I'm providing an opportunity to pursue your innate calling, and if I fail to repair it, if your enterprise crumbles regardless," Harrison gestured indifferently, "then at minimum I'll fall aware I attempted all options, including humbling myself and seeking aid from a server." I examined his expression, seeking traces of deceit or urgency. Both existed, but beneath lay another element. Esteem, possibly, or simply the awareness that arrogance was an extravagance beyond his means. "I'd have to proceed lawfully," I articulated gradually. "I retained my Series 66 qualification and preserved my business entity operational. Persistent routines. Never anticipated utilizing them anew. You maintain your qualifications. Economic guidance defined my existence for 3 decades. Even post-collapse, I couldn't fully release it." Harrison's demeanor transitioned to near solace. "Then we can handle this formally. I demand total entry," I added. "Each transaction record, each borrowing file, each pact and accord, no concealed items, no restricted dossiers. Accomplished. I'd require power to offer suggestions. If I recommend reorganization, you weigh it earnestly. If I advise asset disposal, you assess it, comprehended, and I demand my prior advisory fee," I mentioned, stating an amount that elevated his brows. "Plus ownership stake if we reverse this." Harrison remained silent for an extended interval, weighing dangers and benefits with the fervor of a submerging individual offered a flotation device potentially crafted from stone. "Accepted," he uttered at last. "But I possess one stipulation, which is, we frame this as engaging autonomous tactical advisory, expert revival proficiency. My directors needn't learn you've served at Murphy's." I nearly chortled. from top executive to server to autonomous advisor. At least this path trended ascending once more, embarrassed to confess you discovered your advisor in an eatery. Embarrassed to confess requiring external aid whatsoever, he amended. My commercial standing teeters precariously. Reasonable.in the enterprise realm, confessing vulnerability resembled baiting predator-filled seas. When do we commence? I queried. What about immediately? Harrison extracted his device and contacted. James, it's Harrison. I need you to assemble a full monetary bundle for Wells' tactical advisory. All items? Yes, all items. Prepare it by midday. He disconnected and regarded me with an air nearing optimism. Welcome return to the arena, Catherine Wells. I replenished his mug, my grip firm for the first instance in weeks. Let's determine if I recall the rules. Harrison's workspace claimed the whole 42nd level of Blackwell skyscraper with expansive panes providing a vista of the lake, likely costing more per unit area than most residences. When his aide James delivered the thorough monetary dossiers, I sensed like an explorer uncovering a vanished society.mr. Blackwell remains in sessions until 3, James mentioned, his inflection implying that freelance advisors, formerly servers, placed below fixtures in his regard scale. Ideal, I responded, establishing myself in the meeting space with my brew. I function superior sans observers. 3 hours onward, I grasped why Harrison resembled an individual confronting his demise. Blackwell Ventures wasn't merely leaking funds. It was gushing like an injury victim in urgent care. The Florida Property Initiative singly constituted an economic disaster, rendering a famed shipwreck seem a trivial steering mishap, but concealed amid the turmoil. I uncovered an intriguing element. A sequence of stakes diverging from Harrison's typical holdings. Innovation ventures, life science studies, sustainable power efforts, all yielding moderate yet reliable gains while his showier pursuits faltered. When Harrison came back from his gatherings, he discovered me restructuring his complete monetary framework on the display board as if orchestrating a battle strategy. How severe is it? He questioned, slackening his neckwear. Graver than you imagined, I answered, sealing my pen. But not as bleak as it appears. I guided him through the evaluation, clarifying how his vanity had driven him to pursue prominent transactions while disregarding the reliable, unexciting stakes that truly generated profit. His complexion paled further with every disclosure. So what you're conveying, he articulated gradually, is that I'm a fool. I'm conveying you're an accomplished entrepreneur who began trusting his own publicity, I rectified. There's a distinction, although the outcome proves strikingly alike. Harrison chortled in spite of his state. Harsh truth attacks anew. You desired someone who wouldn't fabricate positives about your holdings, I prompted. I'm fulfilling as promised. Across the ensuing week, I crafted a salvage strategy precise as an operation. Dispose of the Florida fiasco to minimize damages, dissolve 3 lagging divisions, and intensify the overlooked victors. It would necessitate Harrison ingesting his arrogance and conceding defeat openly, but it would preserve the firm. The directors will demand in-depth rationale, Harrison noted upon my presentation of the scheme. These are initiatives I've championed for 2 years, then we'll supply in-depth rationale. I stated expert examination, industry figures, the entirety. This transcends arrogance now, Harrison. It's survival. The initial challenge emerged at a directors' assembly on a stormy weekday. I occupied the discussion table as Wells' tactical advisory formally, outlining the revival tactic to 11 doubtful expressions. This is lunacy, proclaimed Marcus Webb, the directors' leader who'd challenged Harrison's guidance for months. You're suggesting we forsake our most prominent stakes. I'm suggesting we forsake our costliest errors, I countered, my tone composed and expert. The figures endorsed tactical divestment of lagging holdings and redistribution to lucrative areas. I led them through the metrics, demonstrating how the Florida effort was draining resources without viable route to gains, whereas the neglected innovation stakes produced steady yields. The ballot was narrow, 5 approving, 4 opposing with 2 refrains. But it succeeded. As the directors exited, Webb neared Harrison with the look of an individual detecting vulnerability. Engaging external advisors signals panic. Harrison, he murmured. The backers are posing inquiries. How soon until they forfeit trust altogether? As long as required to reverse this firm, Harrison answered. After Webb departed, Harrison collapsed in his seat like a punctured inflatable. He's scheming in action, I noted. I realize. Harrison expressed. The issue is if we can preserve the firm prior to his advance. We will, I declared, startled by my certainty. But we must act swiftly. Over the following fortnight, I executed the reorganization scheme with operative accuracy. The Florida holding transferred to a builder focused on troubled properties. The 3 lagging divisions were dissolved with earnings channeled to obligation decrease. The lucrative innovation stakes gained extra resources. Harrison's firm started exhibiting recovery indicators, but Webb's resistance amplified. He contested each choice, requested extra director sessions, and signaled he was constructing grounds for Harrison's ouster. He's not merely aiming to oust you, I informed Harrison one night while assessing seasonal estimates. He's maneuvering for control based on what? Familiar patterns. I've encountered it previously. Director's leader erodes chief executive, fosters doubt crisis, then intervenes to rescue the firm. Typically entails securing extra equity at reduced rates amid disorder. Harrison gazed at the economic summaries scattered on his workstation. So what action do we take? We persist with our efforts. Preserve the firm despite his meddling. Render our achievement so evident that the directors must endorse you, but I sensed Webb wouldn't simplify it. 3 weeks into our collaboration, I was laboring late in Harrison's workspace when I discovered the image nestled within a borrowing contract from 1987. It was a household snapshot. Harrison, perhaps 2 decades junior, with his limb encircling a lady with ebony tresses and kind gaze. 2 young offspring perched at their base, a lad and lass no older than 5 and 7. My kin, Harrison mentioned from the threshold, surprising me. Past kin, I ought to specify. I elevated the image. Separation, passing, he articulated softly, positioning himself in the seat facing me. Vehicle collision. Intoxicated operator ignored a stop signal when the youngsters were 8 and 10. The terms impacted me like a strike. Harrison, that's awful. It occurred 15 years past, he stated. But his speech bore the burden of one who'd never fully healed. Sarah constantly claimed I overworked, that I constructed a domain for a household that seldom witnessed me. Post their loss, labor became my sole remainder. Abruptly, his frantic urge to preserve the firm became utterly logical. It transcended wealth or vanity. It concerned maintaining the lone element granting his existence purpose. Is that the reason you've pursued progressively hazardous stakes? I queried softly. Because secure options evoke what you forfeited, Harrison stayed mute for a prolonged interval. You're rather the analyst alongside your economic expertise. I'm a parent, I responded. I comprehend adoring someone so profoundly that their absence shatters an inner part. Your offspring. My offspring shattered something distinct, I expressed. Faith primarily, but affection that's tougher to extinguish. We labored in easy quiet thereafter, both concentrating on figures symbolizing beyond gains and deficits. They symbolized aspiration, atonement, and the chance that damaged elements could mend. The firm's revival grew indisputable. Earnings stabilized. Obligation settlements proceeded timely and the lucrative stakes surpassed estimates, but Webb's assault on Harrison escalated. He's summoning another director's assembly, Harrison mentioned, scanning a message crisis gathering to address persistent worries about guidance choices. Permit him, I responded. We possess the metrics favoring us now. At midnight, Harrison summoned transport to convey me residence. As I assembled my materials, he contacted my limb tenderly. Catherine, he expressed, gratitude, not solely for the Economic Council, for comprehending. Don't express gratitude yet, I responded. We yet possess a firm to preserve, and intuition suggests Webb's not concluded with us. The instant I'd feared materialized on an April weekday morning. I was assessing seasonal estimates when James rushed into the meeting space with alarm in his gaze. Ms. Wells, he stated, federal officers are downstairs requesting you. My vitality chilled. After 2 years, I'd assumed the probe's concluded. But evidently someone linked Catherine Wells, the advisor, To Catherine Wells from the economic controversy.do, they possess authorization? I queried, my tone steadier than my sensation. Uncertain, Mr. Blackwell is managing it, but they demand to converse with you. I proceeded to Harrison's workspace with the acceptance of one nearing execution. Through the transparent barriers, I observed two officers in somber attire, their expressions officially impartial. Ms. Wells, the senior officer, stated upon my entry. I'm Officer Martinez. This is Officer Foster. We must review your role in a current probe. What probe? I queried. Business spying and monetary deceit. We think you hold data pertinent to our matter. Solace surged within me. They sought details not to detain me. Your son Michael has assisted our probe. Officer Foster proceeded. He supplied details regarding a plot encompassing various economic entities, including your previous firm. A plot? Per Michael's account, an individual contacted him 3 years prior with a scheme to unsettle specific advisory firms. The objective was to secure their patron rosters and holdings at lowered costs. The space tilted mildly. Someone contacted Michael before the deceit initiated. A director's member of a prominent corporation who focuses on securing troubled firms. Michael asserts this individual supplied precise directions on rendering the deceit appear a kin-operated venture awry. Harrison's complexion blanched. Are you indicating Catherine was deliberately aimed at? We think yes. The deceit wasn't haphazard. It was arranged to demolish Wells and Associates so the holdings could be obtained inexpensively. Officer Martinez extracted an image and positioned it on the surface. Marcus Webb in what seemed a dining spot seated facing a junior gentleman I identified as my offspring. Do you identify this gentleman, Ms. Wells? I gazed at the image, sensing fragments align with nauseating precision. That's Marcus Webb. He's on Mr. Blackwell's directors panel. Mr. Webb has undergone monitoring for half a year. Officer Foster stated, we think he's employed this approach to secure numerous firms, generate economic turmoil, then intervene to buy holdings at minimal value. Harrison rose suddenly and approached the pane. That's the reason he's aimed to oust me. If Blackwell Ventures collapses, he can secure it personally, precisely. But with Ms. Wells aiding the firm's reversal, his scheme falters, which explains our need for your aid. What form of aid? I queried. We require you to participate in tomorrow's Directors' Assembly, Officer Martinez stated, equipped with recording gear. The Crisis Directors' Assembly Webb had scheduled for the next day was packed. Webb appeared with his cohort of accomplices, evidently anticipating to inflict the fatal strike on Harrison's authority. The recording device I bore felt heavy on my torso, but Officer Martinez's speech in my audio piece was firm and comforting. Esteemed members, Webb initiated, positioned at the discussion table's front. We're assembled to examine the persistent economic unsteadiness of this firm and the necessity for fresh authority. He commenced a rehearsed address concerning Harrison's flawed discernment, dubious advisory selections, and the urgency for prompt alteration. But I observed his gaze repeatedly shifted to me, as if he sensed familiarity, but couldn't pinpoint it. The metrics don't back your worries, Marcus, I stated upon his conclusion. Blackwell Ventures has demonstrated steady enhancement over the recent 2 months. Earnings are balancing, obligations are diminishing, and lucrative areas are growing. Webb's expression shadowed. And who precisely are you to issue such evaluations? Wells' tactical advisory seems to have emerged from obscurity. Catherine Wells, prior top executive at Wells and Associates Investment Advisory, I stated, rising gradually. You might recall my firm. You assisted in its ruin 3 years past. The space fell utterly mute. Webb's expression cycled through various shades before fixing on a dull ash. I possess no notion of your implication, he stated, but his tone lacked certainty. Officer Martinez from the Federal Bureau might differ, I responded, gesturing toward the entrance. As if invoked by my terms. The meeting space entrances parted and government officers entered. Marcus Webb, Officer Martinez stated, you're detained for plotting to execute electronic deceit, business spying, and organized crime. In the ensuing disorder, as Webb was escorted in restraints and various directors hurried to disassociate from the controversy, Harrison and I positioned ourselves jointly by the panes. The recording had seized all. Webb's confession that he'd arranged multiple firm collapses, his scheme to secure Blackwell Ventures, and sufficient proof to link him to my initial firm's demolition.so, Harrison murmured softly. What transpires next? Now we reconstruct. I responded. Your firm, my standing, all they attempted to demolish jointly. I regarded this gentleman who had demeaned me as a server and then entrusted me to safeguard all he cherished, who had supported me when federal officers arrived and never doubted my honor. Jointly, I concurred, half a year onward. Blackwell Ventures flourished under fresh guidance, and Catherine Wells once more signified economic superiority instead of controversy. The compensation from Webb's offenses had reinstated most of my original patron's deficits, and Wells' tactical advisory possessed a queue of enterprises pursuing revival proficiency. Occasionally, the finest retribution is merely declining to remain defeated when someone strives to demolish you. And occasionally, the most improbable alliances form the sturdiest bases for restoring all you believed forfeited eternally. At 70, I discovered that countering adversity is always timely. And triumph savors most delightful when it follows someone's utmost effort to shatter you. Appreciation for tuning in. Remember to subscribe, and you're welcome to post your tale below. Your perspective counts.